Friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie The New Mutants in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like. And if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is The New Mutants. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch The New Mutants film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So let's start the video. The New Mutants is a 2020 American superhero horror film based on the Marvel Comics team of the same name. It is a spin-off film in the X-Men film series and the 13th and final installment overall. The film was directed by Josh Boone from a screenplay he wrote with Nate Lee, and it stars Maisie Williams, Anya Taylor-Joy, Charlie Heaton, Alice Braga, Blue Hunt, Henry Zaga, and Adam Beach. In the film, a group of young mutants held in a secret facility fight to save themselves. Boone and Lee first began work on the film after Boone completed The Fault in Our Stars, 2014. The pair pitched a potential film trilogy to X-Men producer Simon Kinberg, and in May 2015, they were officially signed on to the project. Taylor-Joy and Williams were rumored to be cast in March 2016 and were confirmed over a year later when the rest of the cast filled out. Filming took place in Boston, Massachusetts from July to September 2017, primarily at Medfield State Hospital, with an April 2018 release in mind. The film was then delayed while reshoots were planned, and Disney began the process of acquiring production company 20th Century Fox. After the acquisition was completed, Boone returned to work on the film, and it was completed without reshoots in March 2020. The New Mutants was theatrically released in the United States on August 28, 2020 by 20th Century Studios. The film received mixed reviews from critics and grossed $49.2 million worldwide against a production budget of $67.80 million. Plot: Danielle "Danny" Moonstar, a young Cheyenne Native American, is hidden in a tree by her father as her entire reservation is devastated by a tornado, leaving her the only survivor. After falling unconscious, Danny awakens in an oddly empty hospital run by Dr. Cecilia Reyes, who comforts Danny, explaining that she is not an ordinary human being, but rather has unique mutant DNA, and she advises her to remain in the hospital until she learns the effects and how to control them. Danny is introduced to 4 other teenagers: Samuel "Sam" Guthrie, Ilyana Rasputin, Roberto "Bobby" DaCosta, and Rana Sinclair. Like Danny, the others possess superhuman abilities due to the mutations in their DNA. Reyes, a mutant herself who can manipulate plasma energy barriers, has brought each of them to the hospital, after they have each either experienced or accidentally caused a horrible tragedy. Sam can generate energy around his body to fly at jet speed and render himself temporarily nigh invulnerable. After his powers manifested, he accidentally collapsed an entire coal mine, killing his father and co-workers in the process. Roberto, who can manipulate solar energy, accidentally burned his girlfriend to death. Rana can transform into a wolf or wolf-human hybrid with enhanced senses. She escaped her devoutly Catholic village by killing the priest who branded her as a witch. Ilyana has interdimensional sorcery powers and survived sexual abuse when she was enslaved as a child. During her first day, where Ilyana implies there is nothing stopping her, Danny attempts to escape, but is stopped by a force field created by Reyes surrounding the entire hospital grounds. Further frustrated from Ilyana's harshness, being stirred by the grief of losing her family, she plans to commit suicide from the church clock tower, but is prevented by Rana, earning a friend in Danny. The two begin to form a romantic relationship, but Ilyana antagonizes Danny, who discovers that Ilyana has a hand puppet of a purple dragon called Lockheed. Collectively, the 5 teenagers believe they are being trained to join the X-Men, hence the strict supervision. Reyes warns them that they are considered dangerous and should not leave until they have mastered their abilities. Soon, the group all begin to have horrifyingly real visions of their past tragedies, one of which results in Rana getting branded on the neck by the same priest whom she had previously killed. During this, Danny undergoes a neural test, inadvertently discovering Reyes's true intentions. Both Ilyana and Reyes deduce that the visions are the result of Danny's powers manifesting themselves. The ability physically manifests the greatest fears and darkest secrets from a person's mind into reality as tangible illusions. Reyes consults her employers, the Essex Corporation, who instruct her to collect Danny's DNA and then terminate her. As Reyes straps her to a gurney, Danny's panic causes her powers to go haywire. Ilyana and Sam are attacked by physical manifestations of Ilyana's childhood abusers, monstrous humanoid creatures called the Smiling Men, while Roberto, who was attacked by one of the Smiling Men, tries in vain to break through the hospital's outer barrier, which has now contracted in diameter. Rana, who was suspicious of Reyes's next procedure, arrives in half-wolf form and mauls Reyes, forcing her to flee. The five regroup in Reyes's office and realize that Reyes was training them to be assassins for Essex and that, to escape, they must kill Reyes to deprive the barriers of their power source. They find and confront Reyes, who warns them that Danny is too powerful and will destroy them all due to the lack of control over her power. Reyes restricts them all with barriers and tries to again kill Danny by asphyxiating her inside a barrier, which unleashes the demon bear. Danny's own fears manifested through her power and the true cause of her reservation's destruction. On her, Reyes is devoured and Danny is rendered unconscious. Rana tries to reach through to Danny's subconscious and urges her to wake up, while Ilyana uses her powers to travel to her special place, an alternate dimension where she retrieves a glowing sword, armor, and a tiny physical manifestation of Lockheed to battle the demon bear. Eventually, Sam and Roberto join the fight, as well as Rana, all to no avail. Danny is visited by her father's spirit, who encourages her to face her fear. She awakens and confronts the bear, calming and thus dissipating it. As day breaks, the group leaves the now unshielded facility to find the nearest town. Cast! Maisie Williams as Ron Sinclair, Sextamidentious Wolf Canterby then some, a Scottish mutant who can turn into a wolf and is struggling to reconcile this with her religious beliefs. Williams was persuaded to join the film after discussing the character's religious background with director Josh Boone, who identified with the comic book character due to his own strict religious upbringing. Anya Taylor-Joy as Ilyana Rasputin. A Russian mutant with sorcery powers, she can manifest the Soul Zord and use teleportation discs to travel. Ilyana is the enigmatic sister of Colossus, a member of the X-Men seen in previous films in the series. She has a purple dragon companion from another dimension named Lockheed. Colby Gannett portrays Ilyana as a child. Production. Development. In 2009, X-Men film series producer Lauren Shuler Donner revealed to Fanks Film her interest in a film adaptation of the New Mutants comics, but that it had yet to be pitched to 20th Century Fox. After completing work on The Fault in Our Stars, 2014 for 20th Century Fox, director Josh Boone created a comic book with his childhood best friend Nate Lee, using panels from Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz's New Mutants comics to illustrate what a potential film trilogy adapting those comics would be like. The pair had been fans of the characters growing up, with Boone calling the stories really dark, interesting, and different from the typical X-Men stories that we had read. Boone and Lee took the comic to Simon Kinberg, one of the producers of the X-Men film series, who really liked it. In May 2015, Fox finalized a deal to have Boone direct The New Mutants, from a script by himself and Lee, with Kinberg and Donner producing. The film was initially intended to expand the universe of the X-Men franchise and take place 3 years after X-Men, Apocalypse, 2016. While working on the first draft of the script, Boone sent it and his ideas for the film to Sienkiewicz, who thought Boone had it figured out and was not just copying the comics. Updating the status of the film in March 2016, Kinberg said that Boone and Lee were working on the script and that, like Deadpool 2016, the film would be different from the core X-Men films. Maybe not as different as Deadpool, but it has its own unique, original voice to it. Kinberg said that the film would have a young adult vibe, and that there was potential for characters seen in previous films to appear, namely Warpath, Sunspot, and Charles Xavier, Stock's Professor X, who all have ties to the New Mutants in the comics. Also at that time, it was reported that Maisie Williams and Anya Taylor-Joy were being looked at to star in the film as Ron Sinclair, Wolfsbane, and Ilyana Rasputin, Magic, respectively. The rest of the title team was expected to consist of the characters Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, Roberto da Costa, Sunspot, and Danielle Moonstar, Mirage. Sunspot previously appeared in X-Men, Days of Future Past 2014, portrayed by a Dan Canto, who was not confirmed to be returning for the new film. James McAvoy, who portrayed Professor X in several previous X-Men films, was said to have a significant role in this one alongside Alexandra Shipp, who was expected to reprise her role of Storm from X-Men Apocalypse. In May 2016, Kinberg confirmed that the script included Professor X, and he stated his hope for filming to start at the beginning of 2017. By that August, the titular team's roster had expanded to include the character Warlock, while Scott Neustadter and Michael H. Weber, who worked with Boone writing The Fault in Our Stars, were working on a new draft of the script, while Boone and Lee were busy on another project. In November, the report of Williams and Taylor-Joy's casting was believed to be accurate, and Nat Wolff was being looked at for the role of Cannonball after working with Boone on The Fault in Our Stars. The character Demon Bear was set as the film's main antagonist, with the project aiming for more of a Stephen King meets John Hughes style horror movie. Boone soon noted that the Demon Bear was a very personal villain for him as a child, as he was raised by very religious parents. They were evangelical Southern Baptists, and they believed in the rapture. They believed the devil was real. They believed in demons. Pre-production. The film entered pre-production in Boston, Massachusetts in April 2017 in preparation for filming to begin in that city. Location scouting took place, including at Medfield State Hospital, which was previously used as a filming location for Shutter Island, 2010. Fox scheduled New Mutants for an April 13, 2018 release. Several weeks later, the studio officially announced the casting of Taylor-Joy and Williams, and that it was making serious efforts to find ethnically appropriate actors for the rest of the cast, searching for South American and Native American actors to respectively play Sunspot and Moonstar. By then, McAvoy was no longer slated to appear in the film. Wolff was no longer in the running to portray Cannonball, and Karen Rosenfeld was producing alongside Kinberg, who ultimately spent much of production focused on making Dark Phoenix, 2019. At the end of May, Henry Zaga was expected to be cast as Sunspot, and Rosario Dawson, who also portrays the Marvel character Claire Temple across the various Marvel Netflix television series, was in talks to join the film as Cecilia Reyes, a mentor to the titular team. It was explained that McAvoy was no longer involved due to Professor X being written out of the script with further drafts, and Ship's Storm had likewise been written out of the film. Ilyana's brother, Colossus, another character seen in previous X-Men films, also does not appear despite being included in early versions of the script, with Boone choosing to save him for future films. Boone confirmed the film would be a full-fledged horror movie set within the X-Men universe. There are no costumes, there are no supervillains. We're trying to do something very, very different. He had previously said that he does not like horror films, except for classic ones such as The Exorcist, 1973, Rosemary's Baby, 1968, and The Shining, 1980. But was looking to pioneer and champion doing prestige versions of horror films based on his love for horror novels such as King's works. At the end of the month, Charlie Heaton was in talks to portray Cannonball. Zaga, Dawson, and Heaton were confirmed to have been cast at the start of June, and newcomer Blue Hunt was cast as Moonstar after an extensive and challenging international search that prioritized ethnic authenticity. The character was believed to be central to the Demon Bear storyline that the film focuses on. At the end of that month, Dawson exited the film, and Alice Braga was cast as Reyes in her place. The final shooting script for the film included contributions from Scott Frank, Josh Zetumer, Chad and Carrie Hayes, Seth Graham-Smith, Neustadter, and Weber, along with a 6-person writer's room that Fox hired to generate ideas for the film, and also tear apart the script and put it back together. Throughout the development process on the film, the script evolved from the full horror film that Boone and Lee initially wanted to make, and which Fox was resistant to a compromise version without excessive blood and scares, And more young adult-focused, Boone created storyboards with artist Ashley R. Galori to plan out all of the shots before filming. The casting of Henry Zaga as Roberto da Costa was met with some controversy. Zaga, while Brazilian in real life, portrays a character who in the comics is of Afro-Brazilian descent. Boone stated, "Hi, Soak. My goal was to cast a real Brazilian, and I saw 300 of myself black, brown, lighter-skinned. I saw every shade of the sun. It was the same case with Blue Hunt. My goal was to find the best actor who, because they've done so little work, was at least the closest to kind of what I saw in my head for the character. Maybe if Henry didn't exist, I would have found somebody who was darker-skinned, who exemplified what I needed. But it was never about the color of their skin for me." He added that he was not concerned with the real-life racism that existed in Brazil, and that he wanted the character to be a positive representation of the natio. Filming. Principal photography began on July 10th, 2017 in Boston, under the working title Growing Pains. Peter Deming served as cinematographer for the film. The majority of the film was shot on location at Medfield State Hospital, where Boone said every crew member had weird things happen to them. Boone wanted to use practical effects as much as possible to make the film feel like the horror movies that he grew up with. For example, he had actors push on sheets of spandex to create the effect of figures pushing through the walls of a room, a technique originated by Wes Craven. 10% of the film used green screen. On the film's set, Boone explained that the script had been rewritten following the mixed critical response of Apocalypse, so that the plot is set during modern day rather than in the 1980s, which removed Professor X and Storm from the story. Boone felt the film was not largely affected by this change since its confined location and lack of technology meant it might as well be the 80s in terms of the setting. It didn't change our story very much. Fox chairman and CEO Stacy Snyder described the film's setting as a The Breakfast Club 1985 detention crossed with a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest 1975 institution. She said the film was a haunted house movie with a bunch of hormonal teenagers. We haven't seen a superhero movie whose genre is more like The Shining than we're teenagers, let's save the world. Boone was also influenced by A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, 1987. He explained that Warlock had been deemed too expensive to portray on the film's budget, but could appear in a sequel, and clarified that the Demon Bear would not be the main antagonist of the film, but would appear since the film was very much inspired by the comics in which that character is the main villain. Filming also took place in the Massachusetts towns of Millis Lynn and Weymouth, and ended on September 16, 2017. The film's principal photography was described as stressful for Boone, who felt a bit neutered during the process due to having to tone down the film from his original full horror idea. Post-production. Initial cut? Boone and his regular editors, Matthew Rundle and Rob Sullivan, delivered a cut of the film to Fox that they were happy with, and it tested as well as initial screenings of Deadpool did. 3 days of additional photography were planned to complete the YA movie that Boone, Lee, and Fox had agreed to make. However, following the successful release of the film It, 2017, the studio cut the first trailer for the New Mutants to focus on the scary elements from the film, essentially selling it as a straight-up horror movie. With the positive reception to the preview, Fox decided to make the film more like Boone's original vision, rather than completing the version that they had been making during production. Planned reshoots? In January 2018, the film's release date was pushed back to February 22nd, 2019. This allowed it to avoid Deadpool 2, 2018, which had just been moved to a date that would have had both films in theaters at the same time in certain markets. It also allowed time for the reshoots the studio required to make the film more in line with Boone's original vision. When asked about this delay the next month, Williams stated that there had been concerns during filming regarding the short turnaround from the end of photography to the previously set release date, especially with the amount of visual effects still needed to finish the film, so in her opinion, the delay was for the better. The additional photography was scheduled for mid-2018. It was expected to include the addition of several new characters who would appear throughout the film, rather than just making cameo appearances. In March 2018, Fox again delayed the film's release, distancing it from the new February 2019 release date for Dark Phoenix, rescheduling its release for August 2nd, 2019. At this point, the studio believed that the reshoots required were more extensive than previously considered, with intentions to reshoot at least half of the film. The intent was to make the film as distinct from the other entries in the series as possible, looking toward the variety of Deadpool and Logan, 2017. They believed the film would not endure a similar fate to Fantastic Four 2015, which went through similar production issues and became a flop, with the issues not being placed on Boone, allowing him to write and direct the reshoots to complete his original vision. In addition to adjusting the tone of the film through reshoots, they also planned to change an antagonist subplot in the film. Originally intended to feature the Essex Corporation, which was first teased at the end of X-Men: Apocalypse, with a post-credit scene featuring the reveal of John Hamm as the villain Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister, Fox requested the reshoots to include a new post-credit scene introducing Antonio Banderas as Sunspot's father, Emmanuel DaCosta. Kinberg later denied that an actor was ever cast as Mr. Sinister when he revealed that the character had been intended to be included in the cancelled Gambit film. Hamm later revealed that while there were talks to have him play Mr. Sinister, his scene was never filmed. Disney acquisition. Reshoots for the film were slated to begin by the end of September 2018, with Kinberg stating, "Audiences really embraced the notion of a superhero movie or a comic book movie that was, in its core, a horror film." Following the acquisition of Fox by Disney in March 2019, it was revealed that the additional photography had still not taken place, nor were they planned so far. The work was dependent on Boone's involvement, and decisions being made to instead release the film on one of the streaming services owned by the Walt Disney Company. A month later at CinemaCon 2019, Disney confirmed that the film will be released, but indicated that its release date could be adjusted to better fit within Disney's existing schedule. A month after that, the studio pushed the film's release back to April 3rd, 2020, and the reshoots were set to take place later in 2019. Kinberg explained that they had to take time to reschedule because the creative team was still deciding what portions of the film to reshoot due to the difficulty of reuniting the cast given their busy schedules. In August 2019, Disney was reported to be unimpressed with the original cut of the New Mutants, believing it had limited box office potential. Additional work was completed after Disney acquired it to align the film with Boone's original vision, and test screenings with these changes had been positive. In addition to making the film more horror-tinged, these changes also included removing overt connections to the X-Men films. However, the film as released does make reference to the previous entries, with the inclusion of the Essex Corporation connecting the film to the post-credits scene of Apocalypse and to Logan. By December of the same year, it was confirmed that work on the film had been taking place, while marketing had been adjusted to align with the style of Marvel Studios. Boone stated that the latest version of the film followed his original vision. In January 2020, Disney's official fan club website, D23, described the film as a new addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, a statement that was quickly picked up by fans and reporters. Soon after, all mentions of the film were removed from the website, while Disney identified this as an error and stated that the film would not be part of the MCU. Final cut. On March 7th, 2020, Boone stated that the film was complete. Shortly after, he explained that work on the film had halted when Disney's acquisition of Fox had begun, and so no reshoots ever took place on the film. Not even standard pickups that had already been scheduled during initial production. At the time, around 75% of the film had been edited, while much of the film's visual effects were also not finished. By the time the acquisition was completed, Boone had moved on and was about to begin work on a new television series, The Stand, 2020-2021. Before he started production on that series, Disney asked Boone if he would return to finish the film. Rundle and Sullivan were committed to working on The Stand at that point and could not continue editing The New Mutants, so Boone brought on editor Andrew Buckland to help finish the film. The work required to finish the film when Boone returned involved completing the visual effects and editing alongside co-writer Lee, which took several months. Reshoots for the film could have been scheduled at that point, but Boone found that the 3-year wait since principal photography meant that the young cast had aged too much. He also felt it did not make sense to add the post-credit scenes of Banderas, since it was unlikely that they would be able to make a sequel now that Disney owned the X-Men rights and was integrating the property into the MCU. Describing returning to the film after so long, Boone said, We hadn't seen it in a year. We did a bunch of things here and there that we hadn't thought about or noticed a year before. The visual effects that still needed to be finished included Illyana's sorceress abilities, including her soul zord that she materializes, as well as her dragon companion, Lockheed. Visual effects for the film were provided by DNAG, Method Studios, and Moving Picture Company, with Olivier Dumont serving as VFX supervisor. After the film was completed, Boone reunited the cast for the first official screening in New York City, after which Williams stated, "The movie is exactly the movie we set out to make." Disney removed The New Mutants from its release schedule along with several other films on March 12, 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and was looking to reschedule the film's release to a later 2020 date. On May 4th, the film was automatically listed for home media pre-order on Amazon, based on the film's previous April 2020 release date. Amazon took the listing down hours later after it had been widely reported on. At that time, the film was still expected to receive a theatrical release rather than be released straight to streaming, as other films had been during the pandemic. Shortly after, Disney scheduled the film for release on August 28, 2020. Music. Nate Walcott and Mike Mogis were confirmed in December 2017 to be composing the score for the film, having worked with Boone on his previous films. In May 2018, Marilyn Manson announced that his cover of the song Cry Little Sister, originally written for the film The Lost Boys 1987 by Gerard McMahon, which Manson debuted during his Heaven Upside Down tour, had been recorded specifically for the New Mutants soundtrack, despite appearing in an ad in 2018 for the series Titans and being released as a single in 2018. In February 2020, Mark Snow was revealed to have composed the score for the final version of the film, though additional music composed by Walcott and Mogis was still set to be used in the soundtrack. Cry Little Sister did not appear on the official soundtrack album. Marketing. The first trailer for the film was released in October 2017 on Friday the 13th, with a horror focus inspired by the success of the film It, which had been released the month before. Sarah Vilkemerson of Entertainment Weekly felt that trailer delivered on Boone's promise of a different type of X-Men film and was creepy. Vilkemerson also noted the trailer's use of Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2. The title treatment for the film introduced in the trailer evokes the treatment used for that song. Alex McLeavy, writing for The AV Club, also felt that Boone had delivered on his promise of a straight-up horror film and said, "Congrats to this creative team for trying something different with the superhero genre." Writing for Arts Film, Hoai Tran Buai said the film looked like a bottle episode for the X-Men franchise and noted that telling a standalone story led to success for Deadpool. Buai also compared the trailer's tone to Stranger Things, in which Heaton also stars as Jonathan Byers, and Braga's performance as Reyes to Nurse Ratched. Boone, Lee, Braga, Zaga, and Sienkiewicz promoted the film at a 2017 Comic-Con Experience panel, where they also talked about their plans for future films. A new trailer incorporating the changes made to the film following Disney's acquisition of Fox was released on January 6, 2020. Citation needed. Boone sent the trailer to Sienkiewicz in December 2019, and the comic book artist praised it as phenomenal. He stated that the horror elements of the film were still present in the trailer, but that it now also appeared to have been influenced by the style of Disney's Marvel Studios, who he said had appeared to give the latest version of the film, The Blessings of Marvel. Aja Romano of Vox also compared the horror elements of this trailer to Stranger Things, and felt the film looked like highly entertaining, if predictable, fun. IO9's Charles Pulliam Moore praised the more comic-accurate superhero abilities included in the new trailer, especially Magic's, and felt that the less superhero-like elements could be what saves the film from being a flop like Dark Phoenix. Writing about the trailer for Forbes, Scott Mendelson said the film seems to be pretty similar in content and tone to what was always promised, and discussed its interesting position as just a movie now that the X-Men franchise had ended and future New Mutants films were unlikely after Marvel Studios took control of mutant-based films. Weeks before the film's then-set April 2020 release date, Graham McMillan of The Hollywood Reporter discussed several television spots released for the film. He stated that the first two, titled Awaken and Escape, followed the tone and style of the previous trailers, while the third one, Saichas no Attitude, presented the film more like a traditional superhero film, focusing on action, quips, and superpowers. Macmillan felt this was an abrupt shift in marketing given Attitude was released just 1 week after the other two spots, and questioned whether the change in tone was to align the marketing to the film or just an attempt to boost interest in the film by reminding audiences of other popular superhero films. A panel for the film was held during the virtual 2020 Comic-Con Home convention with Boone and members of the cast. A teaser for the film to announce the panel was also released. Ethan Anderton from Sotchip Film felt Taylor-Joy had a great moment referencing herself as Magic in the teaser and felt the footage doesn't look half bad, though he could not say he was excited for the film because of its extensive delays. Anderton also questioned if the film would hold its then-set August 28, 2020 release date, given higher-profile films like Tenet and Mulan had shifted back into August, and wondered if the Comic-Con panel would announce a new theatrical release date or a move to Disney+. Germain Lucier at IO9 also felt Disney would use the Comic-Con panel to announce new release plans for the films, but the panel reaffirmed the film's August 28th theatrical release date while acknowledging the film's many delays. The film's opening scene was revealed during the panel, which Sienkiewicz joined to discuss a new poster he had drawn for the film. Release. Theatrical. The New Mutants was released in the United States on August 28, 2020. It was originally set to be released on April 13, 2018, before being delayed to February 22, 2019, to avoid Deadpool 2, and then to August 2, 2019, to avoid Dark Phoenix. It was delayed to April 3, 2020 by Disney. After that, studio acquired Fox and then removed from Disney's schedule in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Disney rescheduled the film for August 28, 2020, 2 months later. The various delays have led to several online commentators referring to the film as cursed and lamenting its bad luck. Boone and the film's cast acknowledged this curse during the 2020 Comics Show, which included a cheeky teaser trailer that recounted the film's release dates and ended with a fingers-crossed note beside the August 28 date. Boone also revealed the various contracts signed for the film guaranteed a theatrical release, preventing it from first being released on either Disney Plus or Hulu. Home Media. The New Mutants was released on DVD, Blu-ray, and Ultra HD Blu-ray by Walt Disney Studios Home Entertainment on November 17, 2020. Reception. Box office. The New Mutants grossed $23.9 million in the United States and $25.3 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $49.2 million. Originally tracking to debut to around $20 million in the United States before the COVID-19 pandemic, The New Mutants was projected to gross $5.10 million from 2,412 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $3.1 million on its first day, including $750,000 from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $7 million, finishing first at the box office. With 62% of theaters in the country open, operating at 25-50% capacity, the audience was 66% male, with 61% being between 18 and 34. In its second weekend, the film fell 59% to $2.9 million, despite adding over 340 theaters, finishing second behind newcomer Tenet, then made $2.1 million in its third weekend and $1.6 million in its fourth. Internationally, the film was released day and date with the U.S. in 10 countries and made $2.9 million over its first weekend, including $1.1 million in France, $500,000 in Spain, and $400,000 in Taiwan. Expanding to 30 countries in its second weekend, the film made another $4.2 million. Critical response. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 36% based on 139 reviews, with an average rating of 4.8/10. The website's critics' consensus reads, rendering a list of potentially explosive ingredients mostly inert, The New Mutants is a franchise spin-off that's less than the sum of its superpowered parts. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 43 out of 100 based on 20 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Writing for The Hollywood Reporter, Jordan Mintzer said, generic and, at its best, straining to be heartfelt, director Josh Boone's adaptation of the Marvel spin-off comic series is a Marvel movie spin-off in its own right, making vague references to the X-Men franchise but attempting to stand on its own. Unfortunately, it rarely does, even if the film's trio of young and tough female leads manages to give your typically male-dominated genre something of a feminine twist. Peter DeBruge of Variety said, "Despite all the meddling and interference the film reportedly went through, The New Mutants feels pretty coherent in the end. What it doesn't achieve is a memorable personality of its own." The Daily Telegraph's Tim Roby gave it 3.5 stars, writing, "Any depth in these roles has been blatantly sacrificed to a brisk, unpretentious 94-minute running time, but Maisie Williams makes the most of what she gets as a Scottish-accented lesbian lycanthrope called Wolfsbane, as if determined to be absolutely no one's bog-standard love interest." Amy Nicholson of the New York Times wrote, directed in 2017 by Josh Boone. The New Mutants spent 3 years on ice before being allowed to escape into the slowest summer season in a century. That's fitting for a film that's all build-up and no bang. The Globe and Mail's Barry Hertz gave the film 1.5 out of 4 stars, writing, "Instead of funneling his inspirations into one singular vision that he could call his own, Boone has made a Frankenstein of a franchise movie, a giant elevator pitch that leads directly to the sub-basement of originality." The Independent's Clarice Loffrey gave it 2.5 stars, writing, "The New Mutants tramples over its own comic book credentials in order to chase after a concept already more convincingly dealt with by The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina or Buffy the Vampire Slayer." In the days leading up to the film's release, several major publications, including RogerEbert.com, IndieWire, the AV Club, and the Boston Globe, refused to review the film, citing Disney's lack of socially distanced press screenings or digital streaming links and noting that it was not safe to attend a traditional public screening due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Accolades. The New Mutants received a nomination for Best Thriller Poster at the 2018 Golden Trailer Awards. The film was nominated for a Saturn Award for Best Comic to Motion Picture Release in 2021. Comics comparison. The New Mutants comics co-creator Bob McLeod expressed his disappointment with the film for inaccurately depicting the characters. "I was disappointed when they didn't give Danny braids, although I like Blue Hunt. I was disappointed when Ron wasn't a redhead with spiky hair, although I adore Maisie Williams. I was disappointed that Sam isn't tall and gawky, although I do like Charlie Heaton. But mainly I was very disappointed that Roberto isn't short and dark-skinned. Yet another example of Hollywood whitewashing." He also criticized the film for misspelling his name in the credits as McLeod. The spelling was corrected for the home media release. Criticism was also directed to Braga, a white Brazilian woman playing Dr. Cecilia Reyes, a black Puerto Rican character. McLeod further felt that fitting the film into the horror genre was a mistake and that it most likely would have fared better had it been a straightforward origin film, akin to the graphic novel that he and Chris Claremont created together. After his comments went viral, he said he felt bad for Henry Zaga, who plays Sunspot, and told people to calm down and that the movie looked like great fun. Cancelled sequels. Boone and Lee originally pitched the film to Kinberg as the first in a trilogy. In October 2017, Boone said that the characters Warlock and Karma would appear in the sequels. In December, Boone and Lee revealed that they were interested in filming the first sequel in Brazil, and that Sunspot's father, Emmanuel da Costa, would play a role in the franchise. Explaining his plans for the sequels, Boone said that he wanted each film in the trilogy to be a different kind of horror movie. The first film is a rubber reality supernatural horror movie. The second film would have been an alien invasion film featuring Warlock, and the third film would have been an apocalyptic horror film inspired by the 1989 comic book crossover storyline Inferno. Boone confirmed that the second film would have been set in Brazil and included Antonio Banderas as Emmanuel da Costa. Karma was to be introduced as the villain of the sequel, but would have joined the New Mutants by the end of the film alongside Warlock. Boone added that Emmanuel da Costa's connections to the Hellfire Club would have been explored in the first sequel, and he said the overall tone of that film would still have been inspired by Claremont and Sienkiewicz's run. Boone had wanted Sacha Baron Cohen to portray Warlock through motion capture and had discussed the role with Cohen during production on the first film. In March 2019, Disney officially acquired Fox and gained the film rights to several Marvel Comics characters for Marvel Studios, including the New Mutants. The Marvel-based films that Fox had been developing were placed on hold. In March 2020, Boone stated that while it was unlikely that a sequel to the New Mutants could be made, now that X-Men characters were being integrated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he still hoped that the film would be successful enough to allow a sequel to be made. That August, Boone confirmed that there were no plans to incorporate the film into the MCU. Meet the New Mutants. Same as the old Mutants. Or sort of. This is an X-Men spin-off based on the characters by Marvel Comics artists Chris Claremont and Bob McLeod, and they are younger than the hirsute and clawed figures of Magneto, Wolverine, and the rest. The film interestingly presents an origin story in less conventional terms than usual. It brings a kind of YA horror dimension to the mutant mythology. Or perhaps it just amplifies the YA horror that was always implied, but less apparent in stories about infant superheroism and callow destiny. Director and co-writer Josh Boone is best known for The Fault in Our Stars, and is perhaps interested in the idea that superpowers are the result of some awful cosmological defect. This new graduating class is led by Danny Moonstar, a Cheyenne mutant played by the Native American actor Blue Hunt. When Danny survives a supernatural storm that wipes out her family on their reservation, she awakens handcuffed to her bed in some secure medical facility far from home. The doctor in charge is Cecilia Reyes, a coolly severe Alice Braga, and there appear to be no other staff. She introduces Danny to the other slouchingly resentful student patients in various 12-step style encounter sessions, each of whom is nursing a superpower as symptom of some awful secret in their past. Anya Taylor-Joy plays a Russian with the outrageous name of Ilyana Rasputin. Why not just knock off the Raz and have done with it? Who whispers conspiratorially to the hand puppet she has carried with her since childhood. Maisie Williams is Rana from Scotland, who has been traumatized by religious elders with the sort of nasty, vengeful beliefs I haven't seen since Lars von Trier's Breaking the Waves. Bobby, played by Henry Zaga, is a handsome, wealthy, and buff young Brazilian guy whose sexual history isn't perhaps quite the parade of successes that he likes to imply. And Charlie Heaton plays Sam, a boy from a mining town in Kentucky also scarred by a calamitous family event. All five are so institutionalized that despite their badass attitudes, they have all but forgotten to ask on what authority they are kept here. Are they under arrest? Have they been sectioned? Are they being protected from someone? Dr. Reyes isn't saying. Slowly, the quintet begin to come to terms with the idea that their powers have origins they are being encouraged to suppress, not examine. And everything they are experiencing is a result of a psychic wound. And they must ask the question, are they the good guys or the bad guys? Eventually, perhaps inevitably, the New Mutants builds to the gigantic CGI battle that is a third-act imperative for everything like this. But not before we get some interestingly downbeat, one flew over the cuckoo's nest-style confrontations. This film is no masterpiece, but the franchise has mutated. Just a little. The X-Men franchise, which originally kicked off in 2000, comes to a whimpering end this year with the release of The New Mutants. The long-delayed final Fox X-Men movie released in theaters that were just beginning to reopen after a global pandemic had caused the shutdown of many industries around the world, including most, if not all, movie theaters. But The New Mutants faced delays even before the pandemic, as it was one of two unreleased X-Men movies acquired by Disney in their purchase of film studio 20th Century Fox. The version of The New Mutants that released in theaters was director Josh Boone's original vision, for better or for worse. The New Mutants tries to offer a compelling blend of teen drama, horror, and X-Men mythos, but ultimately fails to deliver a good entry in any genre. The story of The New Mutants follows Danny Moonstar, Blue Hunt, who wakes up in a mysterious hospital after a strange force destroyed the reservation where she lived with her father. There, she meets Dr. Cecilia Reyes, Alice Braga, who tells Danny she's a mutant and that she's in the hospital to learn what her powers are and how to control them. Danny's introduced to the other young, troubled mutants at the facility. Ilyana Rasputin, Anya Taylor-Joy, Sam Guthrie, Charlie Heaton, Roberto da Costa, Henry Zaga, and Ron Sinclair, Maisie Williams. Shortly after Danny's arrival, the teens begin to see visions of their greatest fears, and it prompts them to uncover the truth about the facility and Dr. Reyes. And they learn that nothing is quite what they thought. They'll have to band together in order to escape and save themselves. As a premise, The New Mutants' blending of multiple genres sounds exciting, especially after the success of other Fox X-Men movies that had done the same to great success, like Logan and Deadpool. However, Boone, who co-wrote the script with Nate Lee in addition to directing, doesn't pull off the mashup, leaving The New Mutants to feel like a mess of cool ideas. There's too much X-Men mythology and superhero action, distracting from the characters to allow audiences a chance to truly begin to care about the teens, but there's also frustratingly little connectivity to the larger X-Men franchise. Then there are the horror elements, which aren't really all that scary since their creepiness is meant to be predicated on caring about the characters. The resulting film feels more like a hodgepodge of ideas that never truly lands on a single through line. In terms of the stars, they're all disappointingly relegated to one-note characters. Much of the mutants' personalities come from the performances of the stars, but they still only feel like the sketches of fully fleshed-out characters. Taylor-Joy is perhaps the biggest standout simply because she's given the meatiest role to play with, that of Ileana, who's the most multifaceted character simply based on how many parts she has to play in the story. She's part survivor, part mean girl, and part superhero, though the New Mutants never really delves into those characteristics. For their parts, Williams and Hunt pull off a sweet enough romance, with the pair sharing some compelling scenes together. The boys are undoubtedly the most underserved as they play opposite ends of the teen boy spectrum. Zaga's Berto, a brash and overconfident rich kid to Heaton's shy and quiet Sam. Braga does what she can with Dr. Reyes, though the character seems to be there largely to offer exposition and move the plot forward. In the end, there's too little character development in the script for the actors to truly excel in their roles. To be clear, The New Mutants isn't an unwatchable movie. Its quick pace, necessitated by its 90-minute runtime, and the brief moments focused on character, are enough to keep viewers mostly engaged in the plot, if not wholly invested in it. There's potential in these characters and this corner of the X-Men world, but Boone's script and directing don't allow that potential to fully bloom. But with any kind of New Mutants franchise now a non-starter due to the Disney-Fox deal, it seems even the final cut of the movie has given up on truly launching a franchise, seemingly content to just be what it is, which isn't very much in the end. The New Mutants is perhaps a fine first draft of a movie, but is ultimately a frustratingly mediocre watch. That's all to say, those interested in the New Mutants would do fine with checking it out. Boone's film doesn't seem destined to be very many folks' favorite X-Men movie, nor does it seem likely to be anyone's most hated X-Men movie. It falls somewhere in the middle, and ultimately fine but not necessarily special entry on the 3-decade franchise. Like Dark Phoenix before it, The New Mutants will have its fans and detractors, but no one will feel too strongly about this middling movie. Those expecting too much of The New Mutants may be disappointed, but anyone who watches with low expectations will have a fine time. The New Mutants' biggest crime is having too much hype placed on it for its long-delayed release and being the final Fox X-Men movie, and ultimately delivering a largely forgettable experience. The New Mutants will be available on Blu-ray, 4K Ultra HD, DVD, and Digital HD Tuesday, November 17th. It is 94 minutes long and rated PG-13 for violent content, some disturbing, bloody images, some strong language, thematic elements, and suggestive material. Marvel has handled the introduction of many superhero teams effectively, but 2020's The New Mutants was not one of them, with the movie and its reception only becoming more notable in some aspects as time has gone on. There have been many X-Men movies, and under Fox's stewardship, the series was set to include spin-offs and crossovers, including a Civil War film that included X-Men and Fantastic Four characters. Instead, the series focused on 2 timelines, a Wolverine trilogy and a disappointing new team pulled right from the comics. I have loved so many X-Men characters over the years that have not yet been able to be put on the big screen. Underrated heroes with unique powers like armor would be so much fun to explore, as would a comic-accurate Kate Pryde with her dragon Lockheed. When the MCU timeline adds the characters to its series, I want to see an unusual X-Men team that does not include Wolverine but instead focuses on some other exciting characters from the comics. This was arguably the intent of 2020's The New Mutants, although the audience reception for the release shows it left much to be desired. The New Mutants could have been a perfect X-Men spin-off. The film saw an incredible cast of talented stars playing exciting new characters that had never been put on screen, including Wolfsbane and Cannonball. These heroes were trapped in a facility and had to work together to escape alive. With tinges of horror and a cast that included Game of Thrones' Maisie Williams and Stranger Things' Charlie Heaton, the film seemed poised to be a big hit. Instead, it did not resonate with audiences or critics and was a flop at the box office. It is hard for me to even express how perfect a choice Anya Taylor-Joy was to play Ilyana Rasputin. And I'd argue that her performance as Magic makes the film worth watching. Some have wished for her character to be brought back to the MCU. Still, this was clearly not enough to warrant positive reception from audiences. Despite the potential for big action moments, the film instead felt small. The characters' powers and visuals found within the movie did not live up to their potential, and, for the most part, the film did not connect. The New Mutants was an exciting prospect that didn't seem to live up to any expectations for the film, even from the studio itself. The film was pitched as a horror film in the X-Men universe, but little of the horror was effective, and there were plans to make changes to the film after production. The film was scheduled for reshoots. Although details of the Disney-Fox merger at the time complicated things, the reshoots were unable to happen then, and by the time they could do them, the cast had aged too much. Pushed from an originally planned release in 2018, the film did not wind up debuting until 2020 in its unfinished state, during a time when few people felt comfortable going to the movie theaters. Following the years of production and delays, the studio wound up releasing a version of the film. According to reports from Vulture, the studio itself was displeased with. Due to the Fox-Disney merger and the ending of the Fox X-Men universe as a result, it seemed that going back to fix the film was not a priority, and they released it as it was. The MCU can make up for what didn't work in New Mutants by telling stories about characters beyond the major X-Men roster. As has been shown in many X-Men comics over the years, X-Men stories do not have to center around the central team at all times. While I would love to see a comic-accurate Cyclops fighting beside Marvel Girl and Angel in their classic uniforms, I also want to see the other mutants from throughout the comic book history shown in exciting new stories. Characters like Magic and Wolfsbane need to be a more important part of X-Men storytelling in the MCU. Lesser-known characters like Sunspot have appeared in the cast of X-Men 97, showing some progress, and while this was an excellent move, the whole team deserves better. I want to see a focus on highlighting the lesser-known roster of characters, including figures like Mirage in the upcoming MCU films. This would be a fresh way to reimagine the roster and create a new, satisfying lineup for the upcoming films. The New Mutants was not a success for Fox. Unfortunately, this might cause Disney to avoid using some of the wonderful characters from the film in their X-Men reboot. I hope that this is not the case. While I admit New Mutants had many faults, it also had many unrealized potentials. Focusing on the excellent characters that the film decided to use would be the perfect way to differentiate the X-Men reboot. I sincerely hope that the disappointment of the New Mutants does not mean that we have seen the last of these incredible characters. A group of 5 teens with uncontrollable mutant powers are placed within an isolated psych ward under the care of the mysterious Dr. Reyes Alice Bra so that they can control their powers. The teens consist of Anya Taylor-Joy, a vindictive Russian mutant that can teleport and always has her dragon puppet Lockheed by her side. Ron Maisie Williams, a Scottish mutant that can turn into a wolf. Sam Charlie Heaton, a Kentucky-born mutant that can propel himself at intense speeds. Roberto Henry Zaga, a Brazilian mutant that can burst into flames. And Donnie Bluehunt, a Native American who is new to the facility and whose powers are unknown. As Donnie arrives in the facility, the group begins to experience nightmares that connect to the horrors that brought them there, and they begin to wonder why. They're exactly at the facility and what Dr. Rey's plans are for them. Frankly, there's a lot of great potential in this premise that's surprisingly interesting. There are some solid connections to the other Moderna X Meta films through the appearance of Essex Corporation, the evil entity that's been seen in films like Eloana and a Deadpool 2A, and that's very well known for being run by the notorious Mr. Sinister, and some strong potential for these 5 to start a new age of heroes in this universe. It could have a really cool start for something new, but it's almost lucky that this won't actually happen, because it wouldn't really deserve it. The film fails to build its own world and create intrigue around its characters, as it doesn't really flesh out their stories and develop a personal connection or growth. A lot of times, it just shuts in a moment for them to be in the spotlight and then never really touches on them again. One second, we're watching Donnie and Ron have a discussion about their lives, and then suddenly we watch Sam deal with his tragic past of accidentally causing a mind collapse that killed his father for a brief moment and then never really touch on it again. The tragedies and issues these characters have faced and are ultimately what brought them here are so bland and flat that the big moment where they try to confront their fears and come together is totally unearned. Even the relationship that develops between Donnie and Ron isn't fully developed and comes off forced with how the film just puts them together all the time. It's honestly strange to me that this relationship fell so flat with Boone previously directing such little time and depth that it's hard for Hunt and Williams to really bring any real love outside of wandering looks and smiles. Having little to work with and very little time to show their characters' emotions towards their fears, A New Mutant sadly doesn't utilize the talented cast it has. Most of the characters are basically stuck with the first impressions they make and end up being unable to make a deeper connection. As a result, Ilana is just incredibly cold from the start, acting on a total power trip and making derogatory comments towards Donnie. And it makes it hard to sympathize with her when she talks about her fears. Honestly, it's really hard to sympathize with anyone since outside of Sam, they don't really care or feel that bad about the horrors that brought them there. It actually wastes a lot of potential for interesting conflicts in culture, clashes with them coming from different parts of the world. And it could have been a more organic way for them to open up, learn from one another, and help each other grow through their horrors. There's also never any real time dedicated to the group understanding their powers. So Ray's whole concept of them being dangerous and uncontrollable just comes off like total praise in general, just doesn't come off all that intriguing. And her real plan is so obvious that it makes out the effort to make it mysterious to the characters completely pointless. It doesn't help that the film just constantly zips through its story beats way too fast, making it impossible to connect with the story and make the overall boring tone more engaging. This film utterly fails as a horror and superhero movie with how its scares are so bland and uninteresting, and the action being non-existent until the end. Without any sort of engaging characters or story, the film is forced to rely on its horror to get to add any energy to the film, and it doesn't work. The suspense it attempts to build is pitiful. The creature designs are bland and unoriginal. And although it has a daunting presence in the demon bear, it's never utilized well and just kind of appears at the end. It's really easy to forget about the demon bear entirely until it just shows up at the end. Thankfully it does though, as the final battle scene isn't half bad. The demon bear does look cool, the effects aren't half bad, and the fighting is solid. It's a little dumb that they suddenly just understand their powers for the final battle, but honestly, after this log of everything prior, it was just nice to finally get a pulse. However, it becomes totally underwhelming with how it concludes and attempts to give Donnie a sense of growth. That just adds to the dissatisfaction the lack of character growth in this film brings. The New Mutants is sadly the mess it was expected to be, as it can live up to the minimal potential it builds, and is utterly devoid of solid scares, characters, or ambition. For a film that is the last in Fox's legacy with the Exina series, it only represents the reasons that many fans are happy the property is no longer in their hands. Meet the New Mutants. Same as the old. Mutants say broken bar, or sort of. This is an X-Men spin-off based on the characters by Marvel Comics artist Chris Claremont and Bob Mloud, and they are younger than the Hirsute and Claude figures of Magneto, Wolverine, and the rest. The film interestingly presents an origin story in less conventional terms than usual. It brings a kind of a horror dimension to the mutant mythology, or perhaps it just amplifies the horror that was always implied but less apparent in stories about infant superheroism and call destiny. Director and co-writer Josh Boone is best known for The Fault in Our Stars and is perhaps interested in the idea that superpowers are the result of some awful cosmological defect. That his new graduating class is led by Donnie Mooner, a Cheyenne mutant played by the Native American actor Blue Hunt. When Donnie survives a supernatural storm that wipes out her family on the reservation, she awakens handcuffed to her bed in some secure medical facility far from home. The doctor in charge is Cecilia Reyes, a coolly severe Alice Bra, and there appear to be no other staff. She introduces Donnie to the other slouchingly resentful student patients in various 12-step style encounter sessions, each of whom is nursing a superpower as symptom of some awful secret in their past. Anna Taylor. Joy plays a Russian with the outrageous name of Ilana Rasputin. Why not just knock off the Raws and have done with it? Who whispers conspiratorially to the hand puppet she has carried with her since childhood? Maisie Williams is Ron from Scotland, who has been traumatized by religious elders with the sort of nasty, vengeful beliefs I haven't seen since. Lars Van Trier's are breaking the waves. Bobby, played by Henry Zaga, is a handsome, wealthy, and buff young Brazilian guy whose sexual history isn't perhaps quite the parade of successes that he likes to imply. And Charlie Heaton plays Sam, a boy from a mining town in Kentucky, also scarred by a calamitous family event. All five are so institutionalized that despite their badass attitudes, they have all but forgotten to ask on what authority they are kept here. Are they under arrest? Have they been sectioned? Are they being protected from someone? Dr. Ray isn't saying. Slowly, the quintet begin to come to terms with the idea that their powers have origins. They are being encouraged to suppress, not examine. And everything they are experiencing is a result of a psychic wound. And they must ask the question, are they the good guys or the bad guys? Eventually, perhaps inevitably, the New Mutants builds to the gigantic CGI battle that is a third-act imperative for everything like this, but not before we get some, interestingly, downbeat-style confrontations. This film is no masterpiece, but the franchise has mutated just a little. The New Mutants is released in UK cinemas on 4th of September. The New Mutants has finally been released in theaters. After being planned for an April 2018 release, the film has survived 6 delays, a history-making merger. And since the world is burning to the ground, that caused even more delays. For how long it's lasted, Add the New Mutants is simply not worth it. My main frustration is that this film sounded like it could have been great. It's an X-Men movie that doesn't deal with any of the X-Men we've met and roots it in the horror genre. However, director Josh Boone and Nate Lee's screenplay doesn't even attempt to explore these themes or deal with them in any real way, whether that's the result of the reshoots or something else. None of these characters feel like actual people. These mutants are Ron Sinclair, Maisie Williams, a Scottish mutant who can turn into a wolf, Rasputin, Anna Taylor-Joy, a Russian mutant who is magic, Samuel Sam Guthrie, Charlie Heaton, a mutant from Kentucky who can fly, Dr. Ray, Eli Cabraga, who can generate force fields, Danielle Donnie Mooner, Blue Hunt, a Cherokee mutant who doesn't know her powers, and Roberto Bobby da Costa, Henry Zaga, a mutant from Brazil. These mutants sport an accent that pulls you out of the film and comes off as comedic in less than 10 minutes. What is more troubling is the tone-deaf handling of N.A.'s racist remarks towards Danielle and the relationships between Danielle and Drawn. We never find out the genesis for those things. Yet, the film has enough runtime to have a segment that feels ripped right out of an 80s teen comedy. This was 20th Century Studios' last X, been a film before the Disneys. Merger outside of Fata Wolverinia and the Logan. The studio has traditionally played it safe, so this was my one hope of a genuinely different superhero movie. Well, I guess I'll have to wait to see what Kevin Feige cooks up. The road to the big screen has been long and fought for The New Mutants. Originally due to arrive in cinemas in April 2018, it's been beset by delays. A corporate merger and thanks to pandemic that ground the world to a halt, yet more deferrals. After all of that, there's something strange, and a little remarkable about the Josh Boone's film, being one of the few to manage a cinematic release at a time when many cinemas aren't even open for business. But while it's not as awful as some had feared, Add the New Mutants isn't worth the wait either. Part of the frustration here is that the foundations are solid. Each character is dutifully given an origin, as some more effectively than others. And the familiar themes of othering and belonging that are part and parcel of the acts being a franchise or presenter and accounted for. The small-scale nature of this film when compared to the world-shaking stakes of other superhero flicks is welcome too. But Boone, The Fault in Our Stars, and Nate Lee's uncomplicated screenplay barely goes beyond surface deep on a thematic or character level. It's hard to tell whether it was edited out or never there to begin with. But every character ends this movie in dire need of more depth. One area where it looked like He of the New Mutants and might feel distinct is with its visuals with early bits of marketing, leaning into its apparent horror aesthetic. But despite its 15 rating, the movie looks and feels like a 12A with scares that you'll forget about as you're watching. As for the action, it's a mixed bag. There are some fun, Moments, especially, Wiona Taylor-Joy decides to put Tiliana's soup-topped sword to good use on an impressively rendered CG bear, but there's not an action sequence that delivers a sustained amount of excitement. It's not helped by a dark, gloomy palette, which feels all too bland. The one consistent bright spot is the cast who make this watchable in spite of the poor material they're saddled with. While it's irritating, for instance, that Elna's racism she calls the lone Native American character in the movie a standing rock is never reckoned with, the sheer amount of fun Taylor-Joy is having at any given moment radiates on screen. Even though her thick Russian accent falters from time to time, and while she is far too passive as the character who is as tensibly meant to be our lead, Danielle Bluehunt is along with Amazek's romance that for once isn't relegated to a 2C kiss. It's the one area where E, the New Mutants, outshines its franchise counterparts. But that alone is not enough to save it from feeling like a missed opportunity to really do something radical and different. Since 2000, the Xena franchise has soared as High OSA X-Men First Class and fallen as Low OA X-Men The Last Stand. This isn't quite as bad as the latter, but it can't save the franchise from ending on a above note. It used to be that multiple delays to a movie's release date were a sign that something was wrong with the project. But in the case of Fodge Boone's The New Mutants, the fact that even a global coronavirus pandemic isn't forcing the movie to budge from its drop-dead August 28th opening after multiple postponements back when movie egoing was thought to be safe for one's health is what looks like a red flag. Why would Disney, which acquired the project when it bought Fox last year, dumped this Orphan X-Mina spin-off into theaters mere days before launching Milan on its proprietary streaming platform? The answer? Because Disney couldn't keep delaying it forever, but also because this inclusive, female-empowering, youth-centric addition to the already overcrowded X-Men universe had lost its luster after having been greenlit as a fresh take on a successful franchise by a hot up-and-coming director. The New Mutants was starting to feel like the back burner warmed-over smells like old fish mutants. And it didn't help that the franchise's last entry, Dark Phoenix, was such a colossal disappointment. Reshot, somehow rescued from total obscurity, Boone's movie isn't half bad. Alas, it's not half good either. It's basically just decent enough to motivate those sick of shutdown to risk getting sick. Studio titles being released exclusively to theaters, this critic saw it at over-organized drive-in screening in the Rose Bowl parking lot. Boone, who directed the hit adaptation of The Fault in Our Stars, saw in the X-Men adjacent New Mutants comic series a novel way to deliver wish fulfillment to teen audiences. Here, rather than granting a dying girl's desire to visit Amsterdam, he invites young people to imagine what superpower they'd want if mutant abilities kicked in at puberty. When her dad awakens her brusquely one night in the middle of what looks like a supernatural event, Native American teen Danielle Mooner Bluehunt doesn't realize that she might be responsible for the computer-generated carnage outside an ominous cloud, formation too targeted to be a tornado. Then flips cars and smashes mobile homes, emitting a deep, dam-like growl as it destroys all in its path. The phenomenon obliterates the reservation and kills Donnie's dad or so. She's told by Dr. Ray, Alice Bra, who single-handedly runs an institution for young mutants that looks an awful lot like the hospital in Shutter Island. That's because both were shot at the Medfield State Hospital, an imposing late 19th century red brick asylum that makes for an ideal horror movie location. Boone has precisely this function in mind for the place which takes the Ivy League comfort of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters seen in X-Men First Class and pushes it into much darker Stephen King territory. Coming to inside the institution, Donnie meets 4 other patients, each with wild skills it takes her some time to identify. Handsome enough to begin with, jock like Roberto da Costa, Henry Zaga turns scorching hot when his libido kicks in. Ron Sinclair, Maisie Williams, Game of Thrones, Macy Mousy, but she's actually a kind of werewolf who can transform on command. Sam Guthrie, Stranger Things' big brother Charlie Heaton, has a thick southern accent and the ability to shoot rocket-like across the sky. And Rasputin, Anna Taylor-Joy, the wide-eyed, ethereal acting star of The Witch, is able to teleport and turn her eyes and arms into weapons. Like the Breakfast Club on steroids, these 5 misfits slowly overcome their differences, bonding and becoming friends by the time Boone reveals a twist. he must have thought would blow the minds of those second guessing how the movie relates to all the old mutants from the X-Men comics. Whereas all the films in that franchise have run with the brilliantly relatable allegory introduced by Bryan Singer's original X-Men movie A, in which mutants are seen as freaks by their peers, much as LGBTQ teens are ostracized and feared by a homophobic society at large. Boone isn't as clear about how to treat his character's so-called gifts. That said, this is the first Marvel movie to depict an openly queer relationship, giving Donnie a lesbian love interest. Here, these traumatized young people fear themselves, the way some adolescents freak out over physical changes brought on by puberty. This metaphor feels literal in one scene, an overt homage to Brian Deal's car when Donnie finds herself drenched in blood, whose origins she can't explain. Boone, who's clearly a pulp, classic movie savant, repeatedly lifts shots and ideas directly from other sources, as in a Psycho-inspired shower scream later in the film. But instead of creating a new and improved experience for audiences, such magpie directors as Quentin Tarantino, he serves up something so familiar as to be cliché till the copyright D. The New Mutants relies on audiences being too young to get the references. They won't necessarily pick up on the idea that he's stolen the premise from it in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and Young Sherlock Holmes, in which a small group of young people face terrifying projections of their worst fears. At the risk of saying too much, that is Donnie's power. She can manifest whatever secret anxiety you're hiding and manifest it in the real world, which is spectacular to witness. But such and know how it will all play out. What makes the New Mutant seem new? As opposed to an off-brand assortment of rejects stuck in the dugout during the game. Isn't their abilities, but their identities. Boone commits to diversifying the sort of characters we think of as heroes. Although the TV show Heroes did that more than a dozen years earlier, even if Marvel's been slow to catch up, putting a strong native woman at the center of the mix and giving her screen time to explore her romantic feelings for one of the others. Taking a page from M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable trilogy, Boone flirts with the idea that mutants' powers can be used for good or evil. A college term paper or two could be written about how these characters' abilities play into society's prejudices about the groups they represent: Indigenous, Latinx, blue-collar, and lesbian. Plus, a vengeful embodiment of hashmeto victimhood. In the latter category, Taylor-Joy towers over the other cast members. She's a movie star in the making whom Boone identified early and who's sly enough to walk the line between serious commitment and self-parody that constitutes camp. Her character carries a pterodactyl hand puppet at all times, so can hardly be played straight. Despite all the meddling and interference the film reportedly endured, The New Mutants feels pretty coherent in the end. What it doesn't achieve is a memorable personality of its own. The project, so committed to being a 1980s-style teen and horror movie homage that it never distinguishes itself. What was intended to establish the foundation for a possible standalone trilogy plays like an elaborate pilot for a series you'd never watch. And while the production values are slick, the performances and set pieces have the awkwardness of cable TV. While Marvel Studios ensured that nearly all its Disney-produced movies conformed to a single unified vision, Boone was allowed to go rogue at Fox only, to see the results treated like the company's red-headed stepchild. I'm going to be damning this film with a lot of faint praise. After all, The New Mutants has been delayed so much, and so often, its mere existence is worth a round of applause. You may well have forgotten it was originally set to come out in April 2018 before reshoots were planned, and then canceled as Disney bought its studio Fox and things got really complicated. Oh, and a global pandemic arrived on the scene, and it was delayed once more. But still, it's here in cinemas for you to watch with your eyes. And this leads me to my first and most wishy-washy of compliments I have to bestow upon The New Mutants. It made it. It went the distance and wasn't filed away in some Disney vault somewhere or snuck out on Hulu or sold to Netflix or anything like that. Director Josh Boone grabbed the ball tightly with both hands and got the darn thing over the line, avoiding reshoots that would have affected his vision. Do you get the sense? Plenty was shot, then cut out in the edit. Sure, are some bits of green screen a little wobbly? Perhaps if you squint, but in a world where cinemas are crying out for new releases, This is a bit of a miracle, even if many wags are now calling the New Mutants just the Mutants, because truly this film isn't as new as it used to be. The New Mutants rounds off a pretty incredible 13-film 20-year run of X-Men, movies starting in 2000 with the original X-Men, dashing through a trilogy before fully embracing the spin-off side of things with characters like Wolverine and Deadpool, not forgetting the first-class era and its own cross-generational quartet of occasionally excellent entries. After the Sorway success of Ryan Reynolds' Merc with the mouth twice, Fox were no doubt keen to find another different, more interesting angle on the X-Men, and their curse-like superpowers in the New Mutants certainly is that a young adult-haunted house horror thriller that combines earnest character development with a magical sword-swinging portal opening. Everything's exploding ending. Ultimately, we couldn't have yet another rejig of Magneto butting heads with Professor X. And you have to admire director Josh Boone, The Fault in Our Stars, taking a more obscure comic book, run and putting his own twist on it. There's something to it. Not a lot, fine, but they tried something different. And I, for one, am grateful to not be jumping through the exact same X hoops with the exact same characters yet again. The casting department over at X-Men HQ know exactly what they're doing. After their incredible clutch of talent for the first generation, Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, Patrick Stewart, Ian Colonettle, and their equally impressive first-class troupe, James McAvoy, Michael F. Bender, Jennifer Lawrence, they've managed to pull off the impossible yet again, with truly some of the best young actors working today. Maisie Williams alone would be enough to pop up a movie like this one, but combined with Anna Taylor-Joy one day to be a household name, I feel, and certain Netflix alumni like Charlie Heaton, who's casually British, by the way, dipping his toes into a Kentucky accent here. There's a really good vibe with this gang, and it's enjoyable just to see them do their thing, even if on a Russian accent is teeter-totter here and there. Shout out to Maisie also for all her hard work holding up the emotional core of the film as well, her all-important screaming, especially with a Scottish accent. Not quite sure if there's a class on that at drama school, but if there were, she definitely would D it. If you look up the new brutal sentences in the history of film criticism, the film has received mixed to negative reviews, with critics calling the film a middling a social and a perfectly fine A in a word. And it gives me no pleasure to add to that chorus, but it's an unfortunate, unavoidable truth. The film is okay, I guess. After all the delays I came to it, expecting a not much, and a not much is what I received. It's totally passable in a world where we are starved of new and cinema content. I am more willing to give anything the benefit of the doubt. But even still, it's all ultimately a just about decent. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It tries to say something relatively new. It's full of good new young acting talent. I didn't hate any of it. It's just a disappointment to think a Sue movie is the one putting a lid on 20 years of X-Men film. The first proper superhero franchise to show the world what the genre was truly capable of. The opening 40 minutes or so are slow. Boone gives the characters plenty of time to explain their backstories and set up their connections. But from a franchise where certain opening sequences a bam off the page of a comic and reappeared with a flash and a bang the big screen, a great grungy, stormy opening scene is just a bit after that. There's just a lot of weight on all their young shoulders, holding up some plotting dialogue, using their screen presence and sheer human-like ability to win your affections. The trailers are all SFX, CGI, and scary monsters, but the first chunk of the film is a little too fiery for my tastes. It certainly kicks up a gear towards the end, but by that point, there's a feeling like the two tones of action and teenage start gelling all that well. The New Mutants is sold as being scary, at least a little bit scary, but there are no real jumps or shocks or mildly mind-bending chills. You want to be frightened. You want to be scared, but the set pieces don't deliver any real jolts. And if that big A idea is what's meant to set this film apart from its forebears, it fails flat out on that front. There are a couple of moments of, well, I've seen the concept of a properly spooky 15-rated X movie was agreed upon, but the actual execution was fumbled. Putting aside the circumstances of its release, both in terms of being delayed for over 2 years, mostly due to shenanigans related to Disney DSA buying Fox in mid-2019 and being the first major studio release dropped onto nationwide theatrical release after months pandemic-related. Theater closures. Add the New Mutants is a miserable motion picture. It's a monotonous, redundant, and irrelevant fantasy flick that fails to commit to being a teen melodrama, a fantasy, or a horror movie, instead offering half-assed components of all three. Despite the strong cast, the all-too-rare presence of Anya romance between two lead characters, and a few moments of visual inventiveness, Josh Boone and Nate Lias are the New Mutants boils down to being, yes, a terrible feature-length prequel for a sequel that absolutely no one will ever want to see. The film concerns 5 teens who reside in an abandoned hospital run by Dr. to Cecilia Reyes, Alice Bra. Long story short, they are all mutants with unusually dangerous powers who have unintentional or, in one case, righteously intentional blood on their hands and are under supervision until they learn to powers. Donnie Mooner Bluehunt enters the fray after her entire reservation is wiped off the map in the film's cryptic prologue. And even though she doesn't yet know what her mutant power is, she is considered a danger to others. As Donnie struggles to figure out what she can or can't do, while romantically bonding with persecuted like Ron Sinclair, Maisie Williams, the teens begin to experience terrifying visions linked to their own respective traumas. But all is not as it seems. The film does indeed take place within the world of Foxa X-Men series, although that franchise's random continuity negates much interconnectivity. There's, at best, a few verbal references to the X-Men and the fleeting non-verbal reference to Charles Xavier, a character who either still runs the Xavier School for gifted youngsters X-Men Days of Future Past, or left the school to Hank McCoy after his attempts to control Gan Gray went airy. Dark Phoenix. Regardless, these aren't exactly flagship characters, and nobody wears anything resembling a comic book costume, so the film has to stand on its own as a spin-off that just happens to take place in an existing universe. While the film could be commended for being a full-throated genre approximation, it still plays out as expected in terms of comic book superhero expectations. Due to obvious franchise aspirations, we have 5 primary characters who all get introductions, sequences where they show off their powers, scenes where they lay out their respective traumatic origin story, and set pieces where they fend off haunted visions. Yes, that's a lot of legwork for a 90-minute movie. The somewhat standalone sequences of its unkillable main cast being attacked by specifically tailored terrors. That film at least had more than just standalone scare sequences and didn't entirely take place in a single visually drab interior local. Considering Fox allegedly first demanded reshoots after an item made $700 million worldwide, it's ironic that a New Mutants, essentially what Boone shot in 2017, has all of Fed's weakness and none of its strengths. How does one disavow an unruly mutant? Lock it up, says the Essex Corporation, the villain of the New Mutants, an X-Men adjacent thriller about a detention hall for ultra-destructive kids and 20th Century Studios. The manufacturer of this ramshackle flick agrees. Directed in 2017 by Josh Boone, The Fault in Our Stars, The New Mutants spent 3 years on Isaiah before being allowed to escape into the slowest summer season in a century. That's fitting for a film that's all build-up and no bang. The mutants in question are 5 deadly teenagers who, shortly after their powers kicked in at puberty, each killed someone or some entire town. In the case of the disstout Donnie Mooner, played by Bluehunt, with the exception of Anna Taylor-Joy, a Russian who snarls that she's slain 18 men, none intended to murder. Roberto Henry Zaga, a playboy from Brazil, simply learned the hard way that he ignites into flame when aroused. Now, the quintet is under the care of Dr. Ray Alice Bra, who swears she can soothe their guilt with a mix of talk therapy and constant camera surveillance. The sickly teal walls are the first hint that this dormitory isn't what it seems. As for their caretaker's credentials, Dr. Ray's inherited medical know-how from her mother, a veterinarian. Plus, she can create a force field to trap her inmates in the asylum. Her condescension is one part a nurse Ratched, one part the principal. From the Breakfast Club and naturally the kids rebel with a dance montage. The story by Boone and Nate Lee was designed to be a potentially lucrative experiment. As the Avengers and Star Wars bloat with galactic mythology, The New Mutants tests the question, can a slight genre film with one location and no name brand characters pass itself off as a franchise blockbuster? The term X-Men is muttered a couple of times, as if Wolverine and company were foggies on the classic movies channel. These teens prefer a marathon of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Even Professor X, the patron saint of post-pubescent tonks, is merely alluded to with a wheelchair and a look. Honestly, the Tyke's disdain is refreshing. The original A New Mutants comics had debuted in 1983, the year Ramones held for psychotherapy, and its punkish, expressionistic pages wafted spray paint. Boone's version is set in the 1990s and wallows in Gen X and Wii, but the plot needs more pep. Most of the running time is allotted to the impatience and their shame over powers that brought them under the good doctor's thumb. Once unleashed on a series of computer-generated watts, including a phalanx of gangly, buffang disco dancers, the teens' inability to control A or explain other skills just makes them look goofy. While their elders boast the ability to control weather or mental or minds, the fledglings appear to have gotten the drags of a white elephant exchange. Ileana has the gift of flickering into an outworld where her hand puppet becomes a belching, parrot-sized dragon, while Ron played with endearing sincerity by Maisie Williams. Game of Thrones simply turns into a wolf. As for Sam Charlie Heaton of Stranger Things, an explosive miner's son from Kentucky, his biggest moment is when he chains himself to a post and bangs around like a teeterball, score one for the geysers. The beauty of both the New Mutants and X-Men comics was that Marvel really dove into the hearts, bodies, and minds of mutant superheroes and supervillains. Everything the mutants did in their lives was strategically thought out and planned out. The teams always discussed the potential repercussions of a fight. There was never a battle without remorse at some level, a mutant ability without. The repercussions of jealousy, racism, or judgments based on not being normal. There were riots in the streets against the muties, the slang name for mutants. In the midst of muties spray painted on countless walls and actual mutants grabbed by angry mobs and killed or branded with the capital letter M on their bodies or faces. There was political legislation and white supremacists, political and religious, leaders who spoke publicly against mutants as well as other races. Additionally, the government was kidnapping, testing on, and trying to harness mutant powers whenever possible. I didn't realize at the time how close this was to the racially vast histories of people of color, but the comics resonated with me completely. I have great memories of sitting in my room for hours and hours, quietly turning the pages of my Marvel comic books, absorbing every word and drawing panel like a sponge. Mutants were so much more than a superhero. They were a person who had a different type of X gene due to their differences from the non-mutant society. They repeatedly faced anti-mutant discrimination, abandonment from their family and friends, and more. There are even underground societies of mutants that fled a violent public. If you notice in the movie, Aeon Sinclair, also known as Wolfsbane, has a large M scar that someone has carved into her neck. There were times I thought, wow, maybe being a mutant wouldn't be so easy. Claremont and Malaud made me really think deeply about how my life would change as a superhero. There was more to being a superhero than shooting a beam from your eyes or walking through a wall. You could never be careless. You could never underestimate the power your body held. Every move you made as a mutant was in reality a matter of life and death. I truly feel writer and director Josh Boone and writer Nate Lee understand this complexity. They brought to the table just how important it is to realize that a mutant power is a responsibility. Teens with responsibility can be an incredible blessing as much as it could be a terrible curse. Much like a 16-year-old with a car can travel to a new job and earn a paycheck or race, speeding down the road to cause a deadly car crash. Yes, an adult could do the same thing, but as a 53-year-old man, I am much more aware of how dangerous it could be. 5 teenage mutants, say Mirage, Wolfsbane, Cannonball, Sunspot, and Mag, undergo treatments at the secret institution that will cure them of their dangerous powers. Invited by Dr. Cecilia Reyes to share their stories, their memories soon turn into terrifying realities as they start to question why they're being held and who's trying to destroy them. About 38 years after I first saw the graphic novel on the shelves of Jeffrey's Comics, I sat and began to watch the movie, and right off the bat there, it was origin stories in the original Marvel comic books. And this version, like much of the Marvel movie universe, the stray a little bit, but ever. Since Logan, where Hugh Jackman, who plays Wolverine, said, "You can never really trust those comic books," I'm paraphrasing, I've been able to let the two universes coexist. Even if my original Accept Magic, one of my favorite new characters in the Marvel movie world, who replaced Karma, Zen Koiman, a Vietnamese mutant. I am not certain, but I also believe Karma was one of the first lesbian heroes in Marvel, at least that I have seen. I sincerely hope to see Karma in the future, as she is another of my favorite characters. However, this may not happen as Karma was originally thought to appear in this film's sequel in the future, but no new plans exist at this time to bring it to life. I hope that acting her heart out as Danielle Mooner, a Native American mutant. She was talking with her father in the movie, who was played by Adam Beach, who delivered a few nice cameos. I was fortunate to interview Hunt, and having a unique perspective going into this movie was a gift. The movie takes place inside a sanitarium of sorts in which the young mutants are locked from the outside world with no way out. The cast was exceptional. In all of the Marvel movies to date, I think this cast was the best. To me, it was as if the comic I had read over 30 years ago had come to life. There was one adjustment I would have made to the actual physicality of the casting, in that Roberto da Costa was a black Brazilian in the graphic novel. Maisie Williams, who is in Game of Thrones, plays Ron Sinclair, also known as Wolfsbane, a shapeshifter that can change into a wolf. In this film, she struggles with her devout religious beliefs and yet still struggles to maintain her sense of independence. Her battle is a real one just as much as her physical battle against authority. Anya Taylor-Joy plays Rasputin, or Magic the Russian little sister of Colossus, and frantic Kitty Pryde, and to my utter joy, caretaker of Lockheed the Little Dragon. Charlie Heaton does an exceptional job in portraying Sam Guthrie, or Cannonball, a mutant with powers as if he were an actual cannonball. Henry Zaga's Roberto da Costa, or Sunspot, a Brazilian soccer player who has the power of the sun. They are all getting managed care of sorts by Dr. Cecilia Reyes, portrayed by Alice Braw, who is in Queen of the South. Dr. Ray does everything to keep the young mutants in the facility. The mutants, of course, want to get out. But when mutant teenagers who struggle to maintain their powers, much in the same way youth might try to control their feelings when riddled with hormones, and more struggle in their battles, much more than get control of them. When the film first came out to theaters, I soon saw comments on social media calling out the movie for racist words and terminology directed at Donnie Mooner. I didn't know what to think, so I reserved comments until I viewed the film. Do I like racist terminology toward Native people, those who do not ever wish to see it in this film? Magic does use this type of race-based negative terminology toward Munar or Mirage, as her character is called as a superhero, as I certainly do not like racist terminology. I understand the place for it in this movie. The character really, Anna, is a racist and entitled jerk of a person toward Donnie due all of the actors. And I mean every one of them. Williams, Taylor, Joy, Heaton, and Saga were masterful in the execution of their roles. I believe each one of them wholeheartedly. Williams portrayed an over-anxious, religious young girl with sincerity, honesty, and realism. Taylor-Joy did an excellent job of portraying that one girl every one of us knew in high school, that you resented deeply, but also wished for her status of entitlement. Heaton simply was the embodiment of Sam Guthrie in each and every way. I bought it completely. Zaga was brilliant in portraying Da Costa as a smug, yet insecure soccer player that might have been successful in his life, but hides how much he feels that he is a failure in the eyes of his family. Hunt carried her heart on her sleeve. I appreciate how well she led me on the path to the discovery of who she was as a mutant. Her closed-off nature as a character was synonymously made available to anyone who might be watching. The film stars Maisie Williams as Wolfsbane, Henry Zaga, Sunspot, Blue Hunt, Mirage, Charlie Heaton, Cannonball, and Anya Taylor-Joy. Magic as misfit teenagers, with superpowers who have to team up to fight their way out of a mysterious asylum. Originally intended to be a spin-off for Fox's X-Men movie franchise, New Mutants has traveled a rough and complicated road since its initial release date of April 2018. It was delayed to get out of the way of fellow mutant superhero film Deadpool 2, and then to give it a buffer from the X-Men movie Dark Phoenix, generic hand at its best, straining to be heartfelt. Director Josh Boone's adaptation of the Marvel spin-off comic series is a Marvel movie spin-off in its own right, making vague references to the X-Men franchise, but attempting to stand on its own. The review says, unfortunately, it rarely does, even if the film's trio of young and tough female leads manages to give your typically male-dominated genre something of a feminine twist. Canadian newspaper. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video, please? Let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.